Billions of tons of seawater were poured into a volcano, and after half a year, the whole world is absolutely amazed. Iceland is a land where ice covers the ground, but fire lives underneath. And in 1973, those two worlds collided in the most violent way possible.
After lying dormant for at least 5,000 years, a volcano on Heimaey, a small island 6 miles off Iceland's south coast, burst into life, threatening the lives of everyone in its shadow.
This was not just a small experiment. It was a massive battle between the sea and the mountain. For 5 months, a tiny island became a war zone where water cannons faced off against lava bombs. This is the deal. If they failed, their entire way of life would be gone forever. Let us jump into it. Red fountains in the night. Iceland is a place that feels like another planet. Just hearing the name makes you think of freezing cold and endless snow. The country sits right next to the Arctic Circle, and the wind blows hard almost every single day of the year. It is a land of massive ice layers, but deep underneath that ice are giant pockets of red-hot magma waiting to explode. You might be surprised to learn that on a territory about the size of Kentucky, Iceland has up to 130 volcanoes. Some are big and some are small, but today, more than 30 of them are still very active. If people in America fear tornadoes or people in Japan worry about earthquakes, then for Icelanders, the true disaster is the giant volcanoes sitting right in their own backyard. This is a reality they have lived with for over 1,000 years. But let us zoom in a bit on a specific spot. Just 4.6 miles off the southern coast of Iceland is a tiny island called Heimaey. It is only about 5 square miles in size, but it is the largest island in a group called the Vestmannaeyjar archipelago. It is a peaceful place where people mostly fish for a living. Right next to this quiet town stands a volcano named Eldfell. For nearly 6,000 years, everyone thought Eldfell was totally asleep. But in the world of volcanoes, asleep never means safe. Magma is always moving under the surface, even if we cannot see it. That fateful night finally arrived when the peace was shattered forever. On January 21st, 1973, small tremors began to shake the island. Windows rattled in their frames and the ground groaned. Most locals did not pay much attention because small earthquakes are just a regular part of life when you live on a volcanic island. Then, at 1:55 in the morning on January 23rd, a deafening explosion tore through the silent night. The ground cracked open just 650 feet from the houses where people were sleeping. It was close enough to see the fire jumping into the sky from the bedroom windows. Flames shot up fiercely with 40 massive lava fountains lighting up the dark sky like a terrifying light show. In just 2 days, a pile of ash and rock over 330 feet tall formed out of nowhere. Fast-flowing lava started swallowing the land at a rate of 3,500 cubic feet every single second. It was a literal flood of fire. But fate gave the people of Heimaey 2 huge miracles that saved their lives. First, unusual winds from the west blew the toxic gases away from the town and out to sea. Second, a recent storm meant that all the fishing boats were sitting safely in the harbor. Those boats quickly turned into lifeboats for the entire population. In less than 6 hours, over 5,000 residents were evacuated from the island. They left so fast that some people even left their coffee cups on the table. Only a few hundred volunteers stayed behind to watch the island. In the end, only 1 person lost their life during the entire event. Can you believe that? The people were safe, but the island itself had to take the full force of the volcano. The first houses near the crack were crushed by heavy lava and hot ash in just a few minutes. In some parts of the town, ash piled up to 16 feet deep. It looked like a thick layer of black snow falling from the sky. Over 400 houses were completely destroyed, and dozens more were buried under the weight of the earth. Have you ever heard of lava bombs? These are glowing red rocks that shoot high into the air and fall like deadly fireworks. They are powerful enough to burn down a whole house the moment they land on a roof. The thick lava flow was moving slowly, but it was over 130 feet deep. In some spots, it reached 330 feet high. It crushed even the strongest concrete storage tanks like they were made of paper. One fish factory was swallowed by the heat, 2 others burned to the ground, and the power plant collapsed. The island was plunged into total darkness as the fire moved forward. Even under the sea, the power cables and water pipes were cut off by the moving earth. This left the island almost completely paralyzed and cut off from the rest of Iceland. After the evacuation, about 250 volunteers stayed to fight. They were not professionals or scientists. They were just fishermen, workers, and craftsmen who loved their home. At first, they just shoveled ash off the rooftops and boarded up windows. They moved furniture and belongings out of the way of the lava. But soon, they realized the real threat was not just the ash. The lava flow was moving toward the harbor, which was the most important part of the island. If the harbor was blocked, the island would be useless. Looking at the map, you can see that the harbor is the heart of Heimaey. It is home to hundreds of fishing boats and is responsible for 3% of the entire money supply of Iceland. If the lava filled that harbor, the country's fishing industry would collapse, and the islanders would have no reason to ever come back home. The situation was desperate, and they needed a miracle. Everything changed when the authorities realized they had to do something radical or lose the island forever. Harbor under siege. At that exact moment, Icelandic officials and scientists came up with a bold and almost crazy plan. They wanted to use seawater to cool down and stop the lava flow. It sounded totally impossible to most people. How could some streams of water stand up to a mountain of erupting fire? But it was the only option they had left. This idea was not completely new. People in Hawaii and at Mount Etna in Italy had tried to spray water on lava before. But those attempts were mostly small experiments and they did not really work that well. This time, Iceland was determined to do it on a scale the world had never seen before. They were going to spend millions of dollars to prove it could be done. The plan was to build a network of high-powered pumps and miles of pipes. They would draw freezing seawater from the ocean and blast it directly onto the glowing edge of the lava flow. The numbers involved were absolutely staggering. They estimated that nearly 6,220,000 tons of seawater would be sprayed continuously during the operation. People wondered how this would actually stop the fire. See, the process sounds simple, but the physics behind it are incredible. When massive streams of cold seawater hit the red-hot lava, the water instantly turns into steam. This process sucks a huge amount of heat away from the rock very quickly. It causes the surface of the lava to harden into solid stone. As the outer layer turns to hard rock, the liquid lava inside keeps trying to flow, but it becomes trapped. It is like putting a lid on a pot that is boiling over. This makes the lava bulge and slow down. Eventually, cool walls form inside the flow, blocking the advance of the fire. Scientists call these barriers internal lava dams. They are created right inside the stream of fire. But there is another cool detail most people do not know. Because they were using seawater, the salt was left behind when the water turned into steam. Huge white patches appeared on the black lava surface, making the island look like it was covered in snow again. Scientists think that around 220,000 tons of salt were left on the rocks after the operation was over. The steam was so thick that it created giant white columns hundreds of feet high. These clouds covered the sky and forced the workers to labor inside a burning hot fog. The temperature near the lava was often over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the same heat you would find inside a factory that melts steel. Yet, the workers still had to get incredibly close to install the pipes and hoses. They were wearing special suits, but the heat was still enough to melt their boots if they stood in one spot for too long. Once the plan was approved, the real battle between the sea and the volcano finally started. In the early days of the fight, the volunteers used smaller pumps to spray water on the leading edge of the fire. The effect was immediate. The bright orange lava turned black and hard right before their eyes. But the mass of lava was just too huge for small pumps to handle. It was like trying to put out a forest fire with a garden hose. They needed more power. That is when a hero arrived from the sea. A giant ship called the Sandy was brought into the harbor. This ship was a dredger. and it had massive pumps that could spray waterfalls of seawater straight from the ocean onto the lava. The Sandy managed to save a big part of the harbor by slowing down the moving wall of rock. Even with the ship helping, the volcano kept pushing forward. By the end of March, nearly 1/5 of the town was gone. The island was slowly disappearing under the black rock. The people were working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They used bulldozers to build walls of dirt to try and redirect the fire. They monitored every single movement of the volcano with scientific tools. But the mountain was winning the war of attrition. They needed a game changer, something that could provide enough water to stop the entire flow at once. Everyone was obsessed with the idea of getting more water on the rock, and help was about to arrive from a long way away. Sea fighting the mountain. Help finally arrived from across the Atlantic Ocean. The United States sent 32 giant pumps to the island to help the cause. These were not just regular pumps, they were absolute monsters. Each one could pump up to 264 gallons of water every single second. That is enough to empty an Olympic-sized swimming pool in just a few minutes. When these water monsters started running, the balance of power shifted. The lava's advance into the city started to slow down significantly. Eventually, the forward movement stopped completely in several areas, but the workers still could not relax because the volcano was still erupting. The next part of the plan was even crazier than the first. They decided to lay water pipes right across the top of the lava field. Yes, you heard that right. They drove bulldozers straight onto the glowing lava. It sounds like something out of a Hollywood action movie, but there was a scientific reason it worked. The thick layer of ash on the surface of the lava created a thermal shield. This meant the surface was cool enough for a vehicle to drive on, even though there was liquid fire just a few feet underneath. For the first time in human history, people were driving over a river of fire to save their town. In the steep areas where the bulldozers could not go, the workers had to carry the pipes by hand. They dragged heavy sections of metal and plastic through the blinding steam and connected them to the pumps in the harbor. They did not just use steel pipes because those would get too hot and heavy. They also used special plastic pipes. As long as water was flowing inside the plastic, the pipes would not melt. These pipes stretched hundreds of feet deep into the lava field. Every time the moving earth broke a pipe, the workers would go out into the heat, fix it, and keep the water flowing. After 15 straight days of this intense work, they had poured nearly 132 million gallons of seawater onto the fire. Then, a miracle happened. A massive cool wall of solid rock finally formed and blocked the main flow. The lava was forced to stop or turn away from the harbor. Looking back at the whole operation, many people ask why this worked so well in Iceland when it failed everywhere else. There are a few key details that made the difference. First, the distance was perfect. The volcano was only about half a mile from the town center and the harbor. This meant they could get the equipment there in no time. If the eruption had happened far away in the mountains, the town would have been destroyed before they could even set up the first pump. Second, the type of lava was important. The lava from Eldfell was a bit thicker and moved slower than the lava you see in places like Hawaii. That deadly slowness gave the residents of Heimaey the time they needed to plan and experiment. They had time to wait for the American pumps to arrive. Third, they had an endless supply of freezing seawater right there in the harbor. They did not have to worry about running out of water or hauling it from a distance. The ocean was their best weapon, and it was right next to the battlefield. Finally, the technology and the spirit of the people played a huge role. Even though Iceland is a small nation, they are very good at moving heavy equipment through tough terrain. Thanks to their experience, they were able to deliver 32 high-powered pumps in record time. They used every tool they had, from fishing boats to giant construction vehicles, to fight the mountain. The whole world was watching as these fishermen and volunteers stood up to nature. It was a battle that lasted for months, and the cost was rising every single day. The bill for all this water and equipment was starting to look as big as the volcano itself. The logistics of victory. After nearly 5 months, the volcano watering campaign finally came to a close. On July 10, 1973, the giant water cannons were shut off. There was nothing left to spray because the fire had been tamed. The Eldfell lava flow had stopped moving, and the mouth of the volcano was done erupting. When you look at the final numbers, they are absolutely mind-blowing. The workers had pumped a total of 1.9 billion gallons of seawater onto the island. To put that in simple terms, it is enough water to fill more than 10,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. All of that water was used just to slow down one single river of fire. The total amount of material that the volcano spat out was also staggering. Scientists estimate that about 8.8 billion cubic feet of lava and ash were ejected. That number might sound a bit abstract, so think of it this way: the lava alone would be enough to rebuild the entire island of Manhattan, with foundations that were dozens of feet high. It was an unimaginable amount of rock that changed the geography of the island forever. Heimaey was actually significantly larger after the eruption than it was before. The new land was made of black volcanic rock and salt. Now, let us talk about the money. According to the official records, the entire campaign to cool the lava cost about $1,447,000 back then. If you adjust that for today's money, it would be around $8 million. That sounds like a massive amount of cash to spend on some pumps and water. But here is the catch. If they had done nothing, the lava would have kept flowing and wiped out the entire town of Heimaey. It would have blocked the harbor and destroyed 3% of the entire economy of Iceland. When you think about it that way, $8 million was a total bargain for the survival of an entire community. There is another interesting comparison to consider. Around the same time, another volcano erupted on a different Icelandic island called Surtsey. That eruption produced 4 times as much magma as Eldfell did. But at Surtsey, nobody tried to stop it. They just sat back and watched the fire create a whole new island. Why? Because there was nothing to protect on Surtsey. It was just an empty rock in the ocean. But at Heimaey, there were families, businesses, and a vital harbor. Because there was something worth saving, the people decided to fight, and incredibly, they won. They proved that human grit and engineering could actually stand up to the raw power of the earth. The shadow of Eldfell. The victory at Heimaey in 1973 did more than just save a busy boat harbor. It made people all over the world stop and watch. Almost overnight, this small island went from a scary disaster zone to a giant science lab that was still in use. Pictures of huge white steam clouds hitting the hot black rocks were printed in famous magazines like National Geographic. These photos made the people living on the island look like real-life heroes who had stood up to a giant. Because so many people saw these images, a huge wave of tourists started visiting the island, and they still come today. Instead of a town left in ruins and covered in ash, Heimaey became a place that shows how humans can push back against nature. The people who lived there even found a clever way to use the heat from the cooling lava. They figured out how to trap that heat and send it through pipes into their homes for a long time. They took a scary natural threat and turned it into a helpful tool for their daily lives. But as the years go by, the simple story of man beating nature is starting to get a much closer look from experts. Some scientists and local historians are looking past the old hero stories to find some ideas that are much more troubling. One of the most common wild ideas suggests that the huge job of pumping seawater was actually just a very expensive trick to make people feel better. People who believe this say that the lava from the volcano was already starting to slow down on its own. They think the lava flow was getting weaker right when the biggest pumps were finally turned on. In this view, the lava didn't stop because of the cold water. It stopped because the lava chamber deep under the ground had simply run out of pressure. If this is true, the billions of gallons of seawater were mostly a big performance. It was a way to give the scared people on the island a sense of control while they waited for the volcano to just stop on its own. While facts show the water did turn some lava into hard walls of rock, critics say that if the lava was really pushing hard, it would have just flowed over or around those walls. This idea makes us think that we might be lying to ourselves about how much we can really control the earth. A much darker and more technical idea is called the pressure cooker risk. Some volcano experts have whispered that the cooling job was a giant gamble that could have ended in a total disaster. By pumping seawater deep into the hot cracks of the lava, the workers were creating a situation that was ready to blow up. If the water had reached a specific kind of trapped lava pocket at just the right speed, it could have caused a steam blast. This explosion would have been strong enough to flatten every building left in the town. In this version of the story, the people trying to save the harbor were actually playing a very dangerous game with everyone's lives. The fact that the island didn't blow up might have just been a lucky break rather than a perfect plan. This makes the whole operation look less like a controlled win and more like a desperate move that barely stayed on the right side of a catastrophe. Beyond the science of the volcano, there are also secrets about the Cold War in 1973. At that time, Iceland was a very important spot for the US and its friends in NATO. There was a big US airbase nearby that was used to watch for enemy ships. Some people think that sending the huge pumps and experts so fast wasn't just to be nice. Instead, they argue it was a secret test for environmental engineering. The goal might have been to see if human tools could change the land or stop disasters to help the military. If you can stop lava from blocking a harbor in Iceland, you might be able to use those same ideas to protect military bases or move the ground during a war. Even though there are no secret papers that prove this yet, the speed and the huge size of the help from other countries were very unusual for that time. It makes people wonder if the real goal was to see what humans could do to change the planet's surface for a strategic edge. Finally, there is a big worry about how the island is built now that the eruption is over. Heimaey grew a lot during the volcano, adding a large piece of new land. This new ground is made of very heavy rock and ash that isn't packed down tight. It is sitting on an underwater ledge that wasn't made to hold that much extra weight. One local theory says that this extra weight, plus the way the water cooling made the rock hard and brittle very fast, has created a lot of stress inside the island. Some people fear that the island is now top-heavy or easy to break. They believe that a future earthquake might not just start a new volcano, but could cause the new land to simply slide back into the deep ocean. If that happened, it could take big parts of the original town down into the water with it. As the weather on Earth changes and sea levels go up, the way they fought the volcano at Heimaey is still our only real plan for trying to stop a lava flow. But we still don't know for sure if that plan was a work of genius or just a lucky moment in time. We are left asking if we really beat the fire with our pumps and pipes, or if the fire just let us think we did. The real lesson of the island might be that even when we think we are in charge, we are still living at the mercy of the ground beneath our feet. Would you stay and fight for your home like the people of Iceland? Or would you leave everything behind to stay safe? It is a tough choice. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button and subscribe for more documentaries. Let us know your thoughts in the comments.